Hi, my name is Bethany and welcome to my presentation on market research. We're going to be reviewing my internship, so let's get into it. So why we are here, like I mentioned a second ago, we are going to be reviewing my knowledge and understanding of market research and reviewing the student internship that we did over this class period. In review, we are going to be going over the rounds, what I learned, how I did the work, if I could have done something differently, what I would have done differently and why, and assessing my performance. So let's get into it. So starting with round 3, responding to Buoy's RFP. My performance evaluation in this was 4 stars, and my key takeaways were reading the questions carefully, making sure that when you gave the questions, they were going to answer what you wanted to know, the difference between qualitative and quantitative questions, and how to pick between the two of those to get the data necessary to answer your question, and budget and time matter very much when picking your report. A company only has so much to spend. So, I selected secondary research option 1, focus group 1, and survey 2. I did really well in this round, but I think the one thing I would have changed was survey 2 to survey 1, I believe it was, because the cost per survey and analysis and report development I saw in a later email, and the numbers were different. It was 6 per survey and 5,000 for the report development. So, not bad, just double check your numbers. My total investment, though, came in really well, $10,000 under budget, and the timing was perfect, right on the dot. So, round 4, analyzing secondary research. My performance evaluation for this round was 5 stars. My key takeaways for this are read your reports twice, thrice, as many times as you need so that you know that information solidly. I did kind of mess up selecting the competitor in this round. Something to remember about that is the little tiny detail. Double check those. Double check specific words, key phrases, stuff like that. I also did a lot of cross-reference during the round between the reports, the book, and previous rounds. So my competitor selection, like I said, I kind of messed up with selecting a competitor. I think the one I got wrong was Sid's Bags. I think the major issue with that was the luggage features. They were different than what Buoy was currently going for, as well as the market placement. They were mid-market, but they're also too high-end, and I think at that point, Buoy was thinking of itself as just mid-market and not dabbling in the higher-ended stuff. Next, we have my feature selection, which went over very well, got those all correct. Keen eye for detail, make it count. And then pricing. This is something I did cross-reference between reports and the competitors pricing themselves, came up with a happy medium, and did very well in this round. So round 5 was creating a moderator's guide for Buoy. Just a moderator's guide. Buoy's the next round. My performance evaluation for this was 5 stars. So check your RFP once, twice, thrice, quadruple. Pretty much be able to quote it. Just make sure you read it, because the questions you're going to ask, you need to make sure you're very careful about them. You got to think about it carefully and think about them in practice. What do you want to know about and how you want to know about it. Also, keep the bias out of your questions and keep them worded simply. You want people to be able to read and answer them. So, my time frame, my introduction, my icebreaker, question bank, and my activities did really well in all of these. Really, no notes except in one of these categories, I believe it was the question bank. I had the option to select 3 answers, and I only selected 2 because the rest of the questions did not answer what was being asked or just did not have a purpose being in this selection. And I hit the ideal time, so very happy with that. Round 6, this is Buoy's moderator's guide. My performance evaluation for this was 5 stars, and my key takeaways are keeping your questions unbiased and to the point. That's very, very key to getting good answers. Also, a lot of similar points on round 5. Just rereading your questions and making sure you're answering the questions being asked, or that you're going to get the correct data from it. Also, double check your RFP. So important. Like I mentioned earlier, you should be able to quote it. So, my time frame went really well. My introduction also very good. The icebreaker, nice. Open-ended, good, and activities, awesome. Now, for the open-ended, I did mess up 2 of the questions a little bit. I feel like I should have read the activities a little bit closer because these 2 questions were answered in the activities. So I could have used those 2 spots for questions to get a larger range of answers. Round 7, Buoy Focus Group. My performance evaluation for this is 5 stars. And my key takeaways are having a trained moderator. That is the key to good and unbiased answers. If they show a hint of favoritism towards anything, you could get skewed data. Also, pay attention to the body language. This is what really helped me when I was doing the competitors. I had been struggling a little bit earlier with them, but watching the people's body language when they spoke about it and reacting to other people's suggestions is what really tipped me off on how to get that one correctly done. And your questions, read your questions, put the good questions in, because if you don't, it's a waste of time and money for the company, but it's also a waste of time for the focus group that you brought in, and probably some of their own money as well. So, competitor selections, I did really well with this, like I mentioned, watching the body language, and Sid's bag makes a return, but this time being correct. Next up, we have the feature selection. This one, I think what I messed up was the color palette. I actually did write all of the prices and color palettes down while the video was playing. I probably should have rewatched it again and listened a little more carefully. I was pretty confident with the muted, but I think the modern would have been the better option for this. And then with the pricing, did really well again, listened to what people had to say. As you saw, I wrote it down, checked competitors, checked reports, and inputted that. Round 9 was the survey and sample size. My performance evaluation for this round was 4.5 stars. I did struggle a little bit, and you'll see in a moment. My key takeaways for this round are always double checking your sample math and numbers. The Likert scales can be a little bit finicky, so think twice about the options you're giving, that they're not too complicated, and that they're answering exactly what you're wanting them to. Also, don't get too personal with the demographics. I learned that from 2 previous rounds, and I did very well in this one. So, starting out, my introduction, pretty good. My brand read and comparison. This one, I think the questions were a little too similar. They kind of answered the same thing in a different font. That or the wording of the questions was not the best. Feature ratings, that's the Likert scale. I don't really know what went wrong with that. I think it was I just chose one that either re-answered a question we'd already answered or didn't give the information in the way we're looking for it. Open-ended, they were all right. I think the wording was also a culprit for this one. Just a little bit too many words, a little too confusing. Purchase intent, like usual, very good with the purchase intent and pricing. The demographics, did really well with that, learned from the previous rounds. Watch those. Now this is where I think I've done the worst so far. I cross-referenced the book, I looked things up, I went back to previous rounds, I looked everywhere and did pretty much everything I could. It just wasn't really clicking for me. With sample size 1, I don't quite understand why it's in the red because the feedback says that it's really good. And I never saw anything about it later is in proper numbers. For that one, I think what I did wrong was that I had my margin of error a little bit too tight. As well as for sample size 2, my margin of error was definitely too tight because I do remember seeing that in a later email when they were talking about sample sizes, and that's probably what threw the numbers off. For sample size 3, I'm really not confused, but would really like to revisit that one because I followed the directions that they gave me and input the numbers that they wanted, but I couldn't figure what particular thing they were going for because it's saying that it's a little bit too big. So that's something that I will be revisiting and want to learn more about. But moving on to round 10, the sample plan results. My performance evaluation for this round is 4.5. My key takeaways are some plans may look good, make sure they give you the data you need in the way that you need them, which is another one of my points. What is qualitative and what is quantitative? You want to select a sample plan that gives you the type of data that will answer your question properly, and understanding the sampling techniques just in general. So identifying the sampling techniques went over really well, no hazards, no problems. I think a little bit of the pressure to get points from my answers definitely helped me understand them a little bit more thoroughly. But my sample plan selection, sampling plan 4 is I think what went wrong with this selection. I was debating between it and sample 7 and sample 2, and either of those two would have been better. I think I'm leaning more towards having done 7. This might have been too nitpicky, or this might not have answered what we were going for. It's one of the two. But I am happy with sampling plan 5 and 6. I do think I saw these mentioned later in emails when we were doing later rounds. So very happy with how those two turned out. Round 11. This is probably the most fun that I've had with all of the rounds. I really liked it. My performance evaluation for this one is 5 stars. And my key takeaways are just read them all very carefully, understand the language used, both in your coding and in the responses. Being sure to mark the unbeneficial data as unresponsive and do not put into the eventual spreadsheet. Also, don't misclick your selections. You can mess up the report. I think I did misclick on one of them instead of doing design write it professional or the other way around. Don't remember for sure. But these are my results from that. There's the open-ended and the survey answers. I was very happy with that round. It was pretty easy. Felt like I did really well, and I definitely understand it. So in conclusion, over the course of this class, I've learned where much of the data that digital and traditional marketers use, really where it comes from. This has been a very fun class for me, and I've gotten a good grasp on what marketing research means. The key takeaways I have for this class are read and reread your RFPs, your reports, and see if you can find anything that helps you online. That's something I probably should have utilized a little bit more during this class, was looking things up online. But just keep plugging. Watch your wording. Make sure they're clear, concise, and unbiased. It can make a lot of a difference when someone goes to answer them. There are a lot of ways to gather information, but the one that gets you the right data is the most important. So be sure you pick between qualitative and quantitative. I mentioned qualitative and quantitative. This class has really helped me get a thorough understanding of the differences between the two of them, which I highly appreciate because I was struggling with them in a previous class. I really love market research, and I do hope that I'll be able to do this kind of work in the future, and I feel like this class has definitely set me up for that. Thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.